Good morning. Welcome to our presentations. My name is Judit Végh, and here I'm presenting you the research that we have conducted with my two colleagues, Maria Teresa Klass and Joyce Jenkins. The research title is How Do Expatriate Families Perceive Privilege During a Pandemic? How has the privilege of being an expatriate changed during these times of crisis? We are talking about an exploratory research approach, and we wanted to know more about how do expatriate families perceive privilege during the pandemic. This is a longitudinal research, and this study, particularly what we are presenting right now, focuses on privilege. What we know so far about privilege and what are the theoretical backgrounds of this research. So it's status based on assumptions about these groups, and it's kind of societal norm. It's also important that now it reflects on ordinary and invisible advantages. There is also something important we would like to emphasize, that privilege is a dynamic, relational, and unstable phenomenon. Talking about the expatriates, we can also say that they can also become threatened based on an active coping mechanism. And it's also important that they have a kind of motivation to defend their group's status, especially whenever it seems insecure. Talking about expatriates, is also important to mention that they always had that kind of privilege to have that right to travel whenever it's needed. And about the COVID-19 pandemic, we can also say that there were some differences in privileges between expats or expatriates and migrants, and how they can access a certain type of resources, and a kind of new inequalities have emerged. Back to the research and the situation that we had when we conducted that research, the facts were that borders closed, flights were cancelled, and there were so many new entry restrictions for foreign residents. And it had also impacts on them, separation from partners and children, family members, grandparents, and friends. Some of them lost their jobs, income, and other benefits and rights of residents, and unable to travel when needed for family events or in any kind of urgency. We used a mixed method. The first two phases were quantitative research, and the third, qualitative, using thematic analysis. Our study group was based on expatriates, and those expatriates who are living and working abroad. That was the definition we applied. We used a snowball sampling technique, which was very useful approach, especially at the very beginning when we wanted to approach as much expatriates as possible, and we use special expatriate networks to reach them. The research design, the first phase was the first questionnaire, which was sent out between April and June in 2020. The second questionnaire between July and September in 2020. And the third phase, what we are talking about now, we conducted semi-structured interviews with 20 expatriates. So at the very beginning, we were able to reach out almost 600 expatriates in 48 countries. And we were using that group even later, so we always reach them out for the next phase of the research. So our research question was, how do expatriate families perceive privilege during a pandemic? We used a qualitative method, a thematic analysis, and there were 3 themes generated during that third phase of the research. The first theme was being privileged as an individual perception, and it was more like feeling that kind of gratitude for what they had. The second theme instead was being privileged, but in a relational sense, comparing to others, and that was a continuous comparison. The third theme was being an outsider, which was a kind of exclusion, and which we will show later on in this presentation, a kind of double exclusion. So the first theme, being privileged based on an individual perception and feeling that gratitude, we also had the sub-themes based on the part that they felt that kind of gratitude. So they were work, online resources, family, social network support, living environment, and safe country. So let me present you some example. I was fortunate at that time because I had an idea to produce an online course. So based on the work, they could, or some of them really focused on opportunities instead of the negative part. Online resources. I think we all know the fact of going online has created some opportunities, like it's allowed me. I've been able to participate. They found that kind of gratitude was for the virtual resources that they could access. And before that, they were not able to access so many resources around family. My wife and I had a very lucky situation that our children decided to relocate to Berlin to study and work here. So again, it was very important that whenever they felt that they were able to be together with the family, they felt that kind of gratitude for that. Social network support. Fortunately, I had a place to stay in Hong Kong. I have friends and good support system there. So again, they could rely on their social network even during these times of crisis. I think it's just more being happy in our own space too, and realizing we've got our creature comforts here. That's about the living environment. So most of the cases, they emphasize the fact that where they are living right now, it's a good place to live, it's a good home. It's basically about their home environment, so their house, their apartment. And they had that gratitude for living in a space that was comfortable for them. Be grateful that we are in a country where there is no community cases. So again, that was about the safe country where they were in. There was something interesting in this. It didn't mean that we are talking about the country. It meant to talk about the perception they had regarding the country they lived in. So for example, there was Australia, which was for some expatriate a host country, for some others a home country. And the one who just moved to Australia and experienced the pandemic there as in a host country, he identified the country as being a safe country compared to his own home country. Whereas another participant who was Australian and who was living in Singapore at that time, she identified Singapore as a safer country than Australia, which was her home country. So that's very important to mention as well, that the country, being in a safe country doesn't mean that overly it's a safe country, but it means that what were their own perceptions about the country. The second thing was being privileged, but in a relational sense. So continuously comparing to others, that was an important factor, and emphasizing continuously that they have a better situation than the others. Compared to many, many other people, it's a luxury problem that we're having here. It's a good country to be locked up. Other people in the hospitality business, and all of a sudden, the bars closed, the restaurants. You know what I'm going to do? So I didn't have to put myself to question myself about my life. Again, comparing to others, I'm in a luckier situation. Our timing was very lucky. So some of the friends are moving to new places now, and during the pandemic and even going home. For those who are expecting, very difficult. Again, it's less difficult for us than the others, and we are luckier than the others for different reasons. So here what is emphasized is more the status relations, and it seems that they continuously monitoring their situation, comparing to others, and in case that they feel threatened to be privileged during a pandemic as an expatriate, they also try to defend that position continuously. The third theme was being an outsider, a kind of exclusion that could be identified as a double exclusion. So some example, we don't want to be those expats by perchance that we went to the wrong house. So for example, they could end up getting fined, or even worse, because there were too many people, so they experienced and perceived the situation as continuously emphasized the fact that they, as an expat, must keep all the rules even stronger than local people. That's probably the thing that annoyed me the most about. We are all in it together when we are clearly bloody not. Here, it seemed a lot more warm and welcoming and friendly, and to sort of see that uglier side come through and say, oh, okay, maybe we are not that welcome here. I guess it was the first time that I probably experienced the racism sort of element on my side, which I'd never experienced before. So, for example, when the rules is in a host country, they found that they were specifically excluded them from those. For example, there was a rule being able to see close family members, but in case someone was in a host country, their family members were not in that host country. They were in home country. So at the end, they were not allowed to see anyone because the close connection they had was the friends they had in that host country, but they were not able to see them. Or the restrictions, based on those restrictions, they were not able to move back to their home country. So they were like in a double exclusion, that they were not included in all the rules within the host country, but they were not able to go back to their home country. So they were just in between. And that kind of social exclusion is the access to resources, and then to respect to those who do not have that kind of access. But what is important, whether they could enjoy those resources or not, or whether they are included in the new rules or not. So therefore, it's a double exclusion between the home country and the host country. So our conclusions for this research, that explored patterns can help better understand the dynamics of expatriates' perceived privilege, which can support and facilitate expatriates' adjustment and transition process. Explored patterns can also show their coping mechanisms in times of crisis, reflecting their perceived privileged status. And of course, there were also research limitations that we had. Comparative research into expatriates' perception of privilege post-pandemic could capture more specificity of expatriate privilege. And also, research is also needed to examine the topic through the experience of different types of expatriates, such as self-initiated expatriates and training spouses. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much.